Welcome to the Two Norries podcast. This is the first podcast since the second lockdown. And as always, James, my co-host. And today we have a special guest. His name is Donal Clifford. And Donal's going to talk about his experience with addiction, recovery, education, and and he's also going to speak about his job at the moment, which is a psychotherapist, and he works as well with the sexual health organisation.
Yeah, sexual health centre, yeah.
So I'm going to pass you over to Donal, and how are you getting on?
Nervous now, Tim. Yeah, I'm good. I'm a small bit nervous, as you can see, but
okay.
You know, I think it's taken us a while to get up here.
Yeah.
So I think this was building for a while. But look,
Yeah, we this was organised many moons ago, and we've a lot of cancellations, and just life happens when you're busy making plans, like so. Yeah. But relax into it. Yeah. You're amongst friends, and all that.
Yeah.
But if you want to tell us about who you are, where you're from, for people that don't know you.
Yeah. I'm Donal, I suppose. Look, like you said, I'm a psychotherapist. I trained originally as an addiction counsellor. I still working with addictions and people in addiction. And then I went on and trained as a psychotherapist. And then I went a bit further and trained in sex addiction. And I travelled over to the UK and trained in the UK a couple of years ago now. Just seeing what was going on with sex addiction in Ireland. Nothing. That's kind of what prompted me to go. There was nothing in Ireland here being done in any way, shape or form. And kind of even some of the resistance I came up against about even talking about it or you know, trying to get people kind of get information around it. And I think I started doing about eight years ago, I did a paper on it. And like all the research was actually from the States. Like everything I was researching was coming from the States. And like they had treatment centres over there open with 30 odd years that's so 40 years now, kind of specialising in sex addiction. So I kind of I suppose it was kind of, I'd be one of these people who I suppose I don't want to be one of these people who will just give out about something and do nothing about it, you know. So I asked two colleagues of mine would they kind of work with me. So they volunteered their time for the first 2 or 3 years while I was setting up what's called SALT now.
What's the SALT?
SALT
acronym for?
is Sex and Love Therapy. It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, I like the love part as well.
I'm going to cut the two of you short here now, lads, because you're after getting to the end of the podcast already. We haven't get to the start of it. So we just go back to the beginning again, don't we? And we'll just talk about what it was like growing up for you, like, because your story in addiction is very, very important as well.
Yeah, I shot through that part, didn't I?
Avoidance.
Yeah. I suppose, like I said just before we started, my story would be very similar to yours and lots of other people that you've had on here. But like I grew up with addiction, so all my life, like I'm well into my 40s now, 32.
You wish.
All my life, like addiction has been part of my life since the day I came into this world. Addiction was there, alcoholism, and I suppose, look, as a young boy, it was my father who was an alcoholic, you know, and my experience of it was he was an extremely violent alcoholic. He wasn't just a fall down drunk. He was, it turned him into something that I just, you know, I don't think words could describe it, but that's the kind of alcoholic he was. I suppose that was the norm for me. Like I think we discussed it before, like our worlds become normal to us. We normalise it. This is what goes on. And kind of to some degree there is kind of, this is what life is, and this is kind of, and like as a young child especially, like you kind of think this is normal, and I presume every house is kind of like this, and part of you knows on the same hand it's not. Do you know, there's a part of you knows as a child it's not. But like I was actually thinking about it home last night, I suppose, in my little bit of anxiety, worried about coming up here today talking to you about it. I was thinking, geez, what was it like? Do you know, when I really go back, And what came into my mind was, as a child, I used to have horrific nightmares. Do you know, I used to have nightmares for years. Into my early teens, I used to have nightmares. And they weren't just bad dreams, they were proper nightmares. Like, and I kind of, do you know, I never put anything together until I started learning, obviously, about trauma. And I suppose what I witnessed at home and all that stuff. And yeah, I could kind of shoot on through my story here now, but I suppose, look, growing up as a child, I suppose the kind of the reality of it is, and I thought, again, I thought this was normal stuff. At about the age of 10, I remember being suicidal and having plans. I think I spoke to you about that before, kind of having plans of not going on any longer. Now, as a psychotherapist, I've heard that since, you know, that I wasn't the only one who was like that. That would be, I suppose it wouldn't be common, but it wouldn't be uncommon either. And I remember kind of, this is going to sound mad now, but I had a dog. The dog was my best friend. Jesus Christ, that dog saved my life. When you could talk to no one else, you could go and talk to the dog, do you know? So I'd see kids today with dogs and kind of going, your dog is a man's best friend at times when there's nothing else and there's no one else, you know. I used to go out and talk to the dog. And
sad, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Sad,
isn't it, when you think about it?
But
you know?
at the same,
I can understand it though.
it's,
I can understand it big time. Like,
yeah, it's sad in one way, but it's great in another way, because
You
it
had
doesn't matter how you do it, you find a way of coping, you know. And better to be a dog than to have nothing. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
And dogs are great, like, and
They're brilliant.
And I always
Yeah.
say, when I come into recovery, we adopted it, or we rescued a dog, Staff. And I tell no, he brought out a side to me that I didn't think I had, a very soft, nurturing, loving side. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would just be, you know, they're just so innocent, like, and you could be having a bad day, and you come in the door, and it's very hard to stay in the downer when the dog comes over and jumps up, you know?
Yeah. It's like they read you.
Yeah.
They read your form, they read you. Where other people will miss you, a dog will get it.
Yeah.
Do you know?
and they love you. They love it no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Dog will always come over and
Yeah.
just want the love, you know. I have 2 dogs out back there, and
Yeah.
you know,
You have a connection with them.
the minute I open the door, like, they're over wagging their tails,
Yeah.
and all they want is rub. But anyway, sorry for interrupting.
No, you're
Continue
right.
there,
Interrupt
Ronnie.
away. But anyway, I suppose, look, the dog, I would say, was kind of saved my life at that age. But then soon after that, I discovered weed. The relief, even saying it, thinking back to that time, like my first smoke of weed. Do you know, I think you remember your first time you smoked weed. I was able to laugh, do you know, as being a young boy, 13, 14, that kind of age, being able to laugh, but being able to laugh at stupid stuff and kind of silly things, and just having a laugh. And of course then you came with, all that came with fitting in with people and being part of something, and of course that's what drugs do, you know, being part of all of that kind of bigger environment when there wasn't an environment there for you, to kind of fit in with. So, as you know yourself, that all escalates, you know. I found other drugs, and I found other drugs, and I found other drugs, but they all served a purpose, you know. They all gave me a kind of a relief. They created good feelings, you know. They were the kind of drugs I was into. I just wanted to feel good. And of course, back in the day, there was ecstasy, and there was good ecstasy.
No better drug for feeling good.
Exactly. And feeling those feelings that you wanted to feel. It was the love drug. It was like, Jesus, you know. And it served a purpose up to a degree, you know. It served a purpose for me for about, I'd say into my early 20s. And after that, it really started to turn against me. So it didn't last too long. No, drink was there as well. And the one thing myself, I remember being very young, and kind of the one thing I had about myself was that I didn't want to be an alcoholic. Do you know, that's the one thing I knew about myself. And of course, when I started drinking, what happened?
Took over.
It just took over almost immediately. It gave me that effect, but not only did it give me the effect, it changed me completely as a person. Do you know, it just turned me upside down, and I basically, from my eyes, I became the person I didn't want to become. Do you know?
Do you know the ecstasy use? Because I would have used ecstasy as well in my teens, up into my similar note to yourself. The feeling of love, warmth, safety, camaraderie, belonging, all these things that I was lacking sober.
Yeah.
When I took ecstasy with my friends around the fire, just that, like, it's just that's what I chased, and I did chase it for a few years. Took a load of ecstasies, it was all great. But then in the early 20s, it's like, you know what, this is getting a bit old now, you know, and the thought of an ecstasy, you know, would make you sick because you'd be physically sick, like. Yeah. And then you're moving on to the next thing, you know, isn't it?
Exactly. That's exactly what happens. You move on to the next drug, and the next drug then was coke, and that was just like, you couldn't draw coke to a person, you know, and you couldn't, like, probably a gram of coke would get somebody to where they wanted to be, but there's something about coke that you have to take more and more and
greedy
more.
Drug, isn't
just
it?
Greedy, and like, you can't get any higher, but you're still. And I think it's all that kind of, that's sitting down, rolling up, making lines. It's all that kind of, you know, there's something about it where you just gorge on coke, like, whereas you might only take 10 ecstasy in a night, and that's your lot. But coke, you could keep taking it, and that has a hold you then within.
It's a really strong ego drug, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the ego comes out at the forefront, really.
Yeah.
Has to be, you have to be the life and soul of the party, you have to be the number one. Yeah. You know, and I say this from my own experience with cocaine, because that would have been my drug of choice. But it really destroys the person behind the drug then. You know, they become all the things James said. They're greedy, particularly greedy, sneaky, you know, ducking around.
Arrogant.
You know, so, yeah.
Like, I suppose my drug use although it lasted a while, the positive effects didn't last very long. I really should have been heading to treatment when I was about 18, 19, kind of 20, that kind of direction. I really should have been heading off to treatment, getting it sorted out. I didn't. I went downhill. I went downhill fairly rapidly, and I stayed down. I think I was down to about 9.5 stone at the end, you know. I started losing my speech, where I used to be stuttering. My head was gone, completely and utterly gone. I couldn't remember what day of the week it was. I couldn't remember, did I meet somebody, didn't. It was just, I think it's very hard to describe when you get to that stage. It's almost like, I would say, my spirit was absolutely wiped.
Yeah.
You know, there was no hope, there was no life, the drugs weren't working, the drink wasn't working. It was just like, Jesus Christ, another day. You know, and I was at that level. I just didn't want to get up. I had no motivation to meet anybody. I was losing everyone. Everyone was gone out of my life, and I still couldn't see it was the drink and the drugs that were actually destroying me. I think, kind of forward on a small bit, it was around 20, I think I was 27, and I got in trouble again with the law. Wasn't the first time. This time was very, very different. It's going to sound hard now to believe, but there was a relief. There was actually a relief, and going, thank God.
It's over now, yeah.
It's over. Yeah. It's over.
Yeah.
Do you know?
I actually understand that feeling 1,000,000%, because I felt the exact same way. You know, it was just like, it was finished. I knew it was all over, like, at the end. I just knew, like, that the only way I could keep going now was by changing everything that was happening in my life. You know, that life could never exist in the one I wanted, you know.
Spot on. That's exactly it. Changing everything. Like, everything. I think the lads were laughing at me when I came in today. One of the best dressed guests.
Yeah, you're looking well. You're looking well. I like the blazer.
Yeah. I had to change everything. And it took me time, because I still kind of had that attitude that I never wanted to have. It's just something that I kind of grew into, and I suppose kind of the way I dressed, I wanted to get out of the streetwear. I wanted the people kind of stop looking at me. I remember in the early recovery, I used to still be followed around shops by security, and I'm thinking, what's your man's problem? But you're looking at it now, I can see what his problem was. Do you know, I wasn't, and I had a shaved head. Sorry, no, James.
You're grand.
Yours suits you. Mine didn't suit me. I just didn't look well. you know, even though I'd been in recovery, I just didn't look well, which means I didn't feel well, you know, and I knew things just weren't right. So I put down the alcohol, the drugs, all of the lifestyle. I put all that down, but I still didn't feel right within myself. You know, there was still something not right, and I suppose that's what kind of drove me on to do psychotherapy. I'd been to see a psychotherapist. For me, the difference that made in me was just, it was colossal. That's the word I was used for it. It kind of, I was working more on me as opposed to my addiction. You know, I put down the addiction. Like I think I spent time in prison when I got clean. I spent 2 years in prison, and when I got out I had 3 years then clean under my belt. And I wanted to stay clean. Like inside I stayed clean. I went to the gym, I was above in the training unit, I went to classes, I went to everything that was on. I played badminton. It was all about fitness and getting well. I learned to weld.
Doesn't that just bring it back to the boredom thing for people in recovery? It's critical that you keep yourself busy. Because if you're bored, you're stuck with your thinking, and your thinking is your past thinking.
Exactly.
You know, but I was the exact same when I was away. I just kept educating myself, kept going to the school, the welding shops. I was in the woodwork shops. You know, the boredom thing is very important for people in any form of recovery. Like, to keep themselves busy until they get stronger.
Yeah,
you know.
And I remember years ago, my dad was in the training unit, and it's much different to general prison. Do you want to explain to the people that haven't a clue about prisons the difference between Mountjoy itself and Mountjoy training unit?
Mountjoy is very similar to Cork. It's a lockdown. You know, it's it was slap out at the time. Thankfully, that's all changed. The training unit is, you have your own cell. You go to classes, you have freedom to walk around the landing, you eat in a dining hall, which I thought was like, it changed kind of the whole thing for me, where you get to sit down with other lads, you get to eat at a table. There's a bit of kind of bringing back the humanity to people, you know. You kind of policed yourself, really. You know, there was never any arguments or trouble. A small bit, like you'd have, you know, but there was nothing. You had visits. You could sit in a room with somebody and have a visit with somebody. You could go down to class. The welding shop was open nearly all day, so you could go down and practice your welding. And you could sit exams inside there. There was an art room. You'd learn instruments. There was loads. You could play badminton. You could run around the building. You know.
Do you think that prison setting better suited you for reintegration when you got back out?
100%.
It's a pity it's closed down now.
I know.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did they put anything in its place?
I think there's something in there, but it's not. I don't think it's
I heard something about like a prison for older people or something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
But anyway, but it's way better than your general prison.
Yeah. Because like I was clean when I went in, and I wanted to stay clean, and I went to the meetings inside, the AA meetings and NA meetings, and they were really promoting recovery for people, you know. So there was a lot of us inside there. The majority of us inside there were in recovery to some degree. So I enjoyed it inside there, you know. No, that's an awful statement.
It's relatively speaking, like,
as
much as you can enjoy prison, like.
Exactly. In comparison to Cork prison, there was no comparison. No, you were still doing your time, and you still missed your family, and you still had all of that. You were still locked up, but you know, you could benefit from it. You know, it like, for me, I think it just paid off dividends, like, as opposed to being stuck above in Cork prison, where you're basically getting
19
out
hours a day
two,
locked up, like,
you know, which is a long time, and where your head can go with all that stuff. And
you used your time well, so like up in the training.
I did.
You got out. Tell us about the reintegration process. What support you used when you got out? The anxieties, the fears, the no Donal, how you're presenting. And
Jesus, it was hard. I didn't know about Cork Alliance at the time. I didn't actually hook up with any agencies outside. Like, before I went in, I went to treatment. I went down to Table Lodge, same as you, and I was hoping to fall back in with their services, but I think I was kind of away from it for so long. I didn't fall back with them, so I came out myself. But I just remember that feeling of being an outsider in society, not fitting in society. Like I remember walking up the street, kind of not feeling like I belonged, not feeling now I got out and I had a job. I fell straight into a job on buildings, and I suppose I still had my partner, my wife now. She was still there, but there wasn't a sense of belonging there as such. I stayed going to meetings, AA meetings, NA meetings, but it was hard. It was really hard when I didn't have a kind of a support network around me. So I ground out that for about a year, I think, and I wanted to go to college. There was always something in me about education and getting education, because I left school at 16. I kind of left home at 16, left school at 16. School just wasn't for me at all. So I know my story is kind of waving a bit. But I went to college and started studying as an addiction counsellor. And
where was that? What college?
I started in the College of Com. Yeah.
And what was the course?
The course was...
It wasn't applied psychology, social studies, was it?
No, it was addiction studies at the time.
Okay.
Started there, and I remember the first night inside in the class, there was there was prison officers inside there and probation officers inside there.
Yeah.
I was like, oh Jesus Christ, what am I doing here? And like the guy who was running the course, Declan was his name, and he was kind of saying, "Are you sure now? Do you want to do this? And I don't think you're ready." Listen, I kind of blagged my way into it.
It wasn't very encouraging for somebody that already had imposter syndrome. Yeah. He was trying to give you an avenue out there, like, wasn't it? Fair play, he was grounded out.
I grounded out. No, again, I'd be like myself, I didn't have an education at that stage. Like, I'd never turned on a computer. I don't even think I had an email address, I was saying to my wife, girlfriend at the time, I was saying, if I write out my essays, will you type them out? And she was like, not a hope. So I had to learn how to use a computer my first year, and that was, I tell you now, that through it, I was looking for A and I was looking for E, and where's E? I tried to write out an essay like this. I got through it, and at the end of it, he encouraged me to kind of go on and do a bit more, so I did. And I got on well with everybody in the class, I actually fitted in with them. I think anyway, they could be thinking something else. But I enjoyed being with them, like. So I went on then and studied psychotherapy after that, just to keep the college thing. I didn't really know what psychotherapy was. It was just counselling to me, you know. And I think that was kind of the real kind of defining change in my own recovery.
Where did you go to do the psychotherapy?
I went to CIT. I went out to CIT.
Talk a little bit about that course, Donny, in terms of what it can do for a person on the course in their own, say, recovery and personal growth.
I think from my experience of it, it gave me more of an understanding of where I came from. It gave me more of an understanding of what happened. It definitely helped me repair some of, I suppose, my own unresolved issues, or at least it gave me a good start on repairing. There's a lot of group work involved in it, and like a lot of it is your own reflection on yourself and your own process. Like there's a lot of group therapy in it. I loved it, absolutely loved it. Now it brought up bucket loads for me, so there was a lot of tears going through that course, especially in the first 2 years, maybe even third year. There was a lot of tears because it's all your own stuff, and kind of,
because how can you help somebody work through their own traumas if you haven't dealt with your own first? So that makes sense. Yeah. That by the time you graduate, you've got a ton of personal development under your belt. Yeah.
A fortune of it, and you get a fortune out of it, and you have to do so many hours yourself of your own personal therapy. I think you have to do about 25 hours a year. I was easily doing my 25 hours a year. I suppose I just got suckered into therapy where I could see the benefits of it. I could, it was having, like, whereas when I was doing the addiction, it was all about the addiction and the damage I'd done and having to stop, and at the end of it I was almost left with, Jesus Christ, it was almost all my fault, becoming an addict. That's kind of what I was left with. And I know that isn't it today. But that's what I was left with. I'm just a bad, horrible person. And then I started doing the therapy, and I started looking at myself, and I started understanding what did happen. You know, what actually happened in my life that turned me from the small child I was into the person I'd become, that I absolutely hated. I hated the person I'd become, you know. I took no enjoyment out of being that person.
That's a normal thing for a lot of people in addiction. Like, they have that belief that they're no good, that they're bad, that they're not worthy, you know, because that's how I felt as well. You know, and sometimes that unworthy feeling can pop up here and there again, and I have to catch it and say, no, hold up a minute, I know where this is coming from now. Let's just put you to sleep for a bit.
Yeah.
Because I know I'm worthy. Because what I'm doing at the moment is just trying to live a life, an honest life, and do the best I can, you know.
It takes a good therapist or counsellor to help you see your self-worth, because like that I would have went into treatment with no self-esteem, do you know what I mean, a very poor self-image and all these things. But when I come out of there, I had a bit more mass in myself, and I had a bit more like, you know what, you can actually, you deserve more from life, James, you know what I mean, you're not as bad as what you thought you were, and you know, maybe you have a bit of potential, like, but it took 6 months intensive therapy in a residential centre for me to get to that point, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's very hard to do it on your own. Very hard,
yeah. I don't think you would be doing it on your own. No. I think that's what happens, is a lot of people try and do it on their own, and they try and just go to, we'll say, the likes of AA or NA, and really it's the messages, and for me it's the felt sense of it. Like, you can say, okay, I can work it out in my head, I'm not a bad person, but you can still have a sense of,
it's about living it, isn't it?
And it's like the shame and that felt,
it's ingrained inside.
And I keep pointing here because it was there.
Sure, in our cores, isn't it?
And it was like, even your heart, everything, it's like your insides are rotten, and you're trying to tell yourself you're okay, but you don't feel okay. You know, and you might walk around, other people might think, oh, you're doing well and you're grand and you're this and you're that, but you, like, it's inside your own skin.
Talk about a little bit about that, in terms of where does that come from. Say, for instance, now I feel a lot of shame. You know, I know where my shame comes from because I've looked into it, and I know where it comes from, my own past. You know, like, a lot of people just out there just feel shame all the time. You know, and it's we often spoke about it, it's toxic shame. You know, and they have no understanding of where that may have came from. They don't even know what it is. They just feel like they're bad all the time. Where does it really come from, and when, and what age? And
I suppose it's like, what age? For me, some of this stuff goes way back. Like, even before your birth.
Yeah.
Some of it goes back to your grandparents, your great grandparents. All of that stuff gets passed down. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be yours. Messages can get passed down. You know, it could be something about your family. Like, I'd have something about my family. You know, that it just, and it's not even mine, and I know it's not mine, but it's still there. You know, and then when there's stuff passed down, you pick up more of it, and somebody looks at you wrong and goes, okay, they know something about me, and you kind of, they don't like me, or there's something wrong with me. And then kind of that gets played out as well, you know. I think that was my sense of where I grew up, is that people knew stuff about me and my family, and it was like, and of course there was messages being passed, you know, about who you are and where you come from, and there was judgments and all that kind of stuff, and that gets picked up, especially in children. They pick it up, like, that this stuff, there's something wrong with you, and that can be held inside, and in your mind as an adult you can know, but I'm okay, but you mightn't feel okay. You know, so it's more of the core of the person. I think I had a couple of counsellors, and they kind of worked on that, as opposed to my thoughts and my thinking.
I'm reading the book at the moment in Audible. I throw it on in the car when I'm driving. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk.
That's the one.
And he's talking about what you're talking about, the intergenerational trauma and passing on in your genes. And a child can be born with these genes of shame and all these things, what we're talking about. But if the child is born, the child can be born with them predispositions, but there are no guarantees that the child is going to grow up with all these negative traits. If the child comes into a loving, stable home where the parents are responsive and there's safety and security, but if you're born with these predispositions into a home where there's violence or addiction or parental imprisonment or poverty, deprivation, then they can become very problematic later in life. And if you had these predispositions from your grandfather, as you said, and father, and then you're born into a home of alcoholism in the home, it's never going to turn out good for you.
Yeah.
And the shame comes, the generation, it's just becomes cyclical.
Yep.
What's the name of that book again?
The Body Keeps the Score.
Body, and there's another one as well there I've read as well. It's a great book as well. It's called Healing the Shame That Binds You by John Bradshaw. It explains a lot of that in detail as well.
Yeah. We link both books in the description for people watching.
Yeah. Excellent. They're excellent books. I was saying to you inside, like, the body, and I think, like, even the title of the book, that's nearly enough to know, like, you know, like, I remember I had a guy in group recently, and I know he has trauma in his past, but he was talking about the lockdown. I was saying to you, kind of, that's what happened to me as well, that when you have to sit with something for so long, it does manifest in the body. You know, you might think I'm grand, but like, he was talking about sitting in the lockdown and kind of having these jitters and these, like, that's coming from his history. It's not coming from just sitting down saying I'm in lockdown now for 5 weeks. You know, it gets stored in the body. You know.
And another thing there, that the body just doesn't want this. It's the leader. The body wants to be kept busy, and if you're in a lockdown and you can't go to work or you can't socialise, a lot of that stuff. That's why there was so many people suffering with their mental health, in my opinion. It's because they were so busy all along, and now all of a sudden they have to sit still, be at home, no social interaction, and they're having to sit with all these feelings and emotions, and it's a tough thing to do.
It is.
Even at the moment, the government has stopped releasing figures for suicides in Ireland. Now, there's going to be, so the world industry is going to be a huge number of suicides at the end of the year. Yep. They're already after seeing a huge rise. They stopped publishing them because of they might be scaring people or whatever. And I'd say if they can avoid it at all, car crashes, drownings, overdoses, they won't class them as suicides. But even accepting all them, even they probably will make for bigger numbers if they're added in. But as far as we know, suicides due to COVID are through the roof in Ireland, and it's like we have to find a balance between managing the risk of COVID and then the mental health is just as bad, if not worse. You know, but we're not finding the balance at the moment.
No.
But look, we digress, Donal, and we'll come back to you.
I was enjoying that.
I know, But so you were into psychotherapy.
Yeah.
You've done a ton of work on yourself.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah.
You graduated. What was the crack?
What was the crack? The crack was
huge sense of relief and pride comes with the graduation. You've come from
unbelievable. Like I left school. I wouldn't say no, I couldn't read and write, but I left school. I probably left school around the age of 8 or 9, you know, in my head. But physically then, I left at the age of 16. I was gone. It just wasn't for me at all. I couldn't retain anything. And I heard a quote there a couple of years ago, a brain in pain can't retain. And I said,
very good.
That fits. I just couldn't remember anything. I couldn't do maths. I couldn't read what I was at now, saying that I have dyslexia as well. So that is part of it, but I just couldn't remember anything. I could pick up a book and I say, I can't even bother reading this now because I know I won't remember anything at the end of it.
I can really relate to that.
But it makes sense. Like my thing at the time, looking back, I know what I understand was everything for me up to an age was about survival. It wasn't about getting an education or learning my tables, or because that stuff was worthless to me at that time. It was worthless. But sorry, where was I with that?
Oh, you'll come to the graduation, the pride and everything that comes with that, and the sense of achievement because of where you've come from. Huge
Sense of pride. My wife, I get emotional with this part of it. My wife was there. My 2 kids were there. I have 2 kids now, 2 daughters. It's like life had turned completely upside down for me. Like completely and utterly upside down.
You had a great night though. You had plenty of good food.
Yeah.
Plenty of good food. I remember. I remember it.
I celebrated it. I kind of marked it as if, it was a huge occasion for me. I never would have seen myself, doing anything like that. I think
big
it was
step, isn't it, Donal?
Huge step, huge.
And to have something like that then, and do you know what? And no, I'm not bringing it back to me here, but it's relevant to what you said. Even when I had that 30-second clip at a graduation, I was so proud for them few seconds, like my name being mentioned, and it was online, and I can it's just brought me back to how you must have felt being up on that stage with this piece of paper and your kids and your wife and the stage and knowing like that. Do you know what? I've actually accomplished something that's really, really going to inspire my 2 kids, number one.
Yeah.
And everybody around me to follow, to see what I'm after doing. They could do the exact same. I think that's marvellous.
That was it, yeah.
And the people watching, like Timmy was fucking off his fucking game. And everybody knows Timmy for being off his game. But now for him to go become so settled and calm, so to be graduating from CIT, it just shows why anybody can do it if you if you want it.
Yeah. If it's what you want. If it's what you want. For me, it was burning inside me that I wanted to go to college now. Again, never thought I could have done it, and even when I was doing it, didn't think I was going to make it to the end. And just that sense of pride and achievement, thinking, like, I think I'm 18 years clean in January. I am 18 years clean in January.
Well done.
So it's a long time. But even for me, to get clean was a huge thing, And I remember celebrating my 10 years clean and sober. But then kind of to do college was just, it was for me, it was fucking massive. It was just one of the biggest things I think I could have possibly achieved. I did that, and that kind of drove me then to go on and do a bit more. Now, it's just still, being honest about it, there's loads more I want to do.
Lifelong learning. We don't ever stop. It's an inquiry, and it's you're what's the word I'm looking for? You're inquisitive and you want to learn. You're curious. You're curious. Once you start learning, you get the bug, and you're a therapist. You want to be a better therapist all the time. You're coming up against, or you're meeting unique people, unique experiences, and things might throw you, and you want to read some literature on that. And studies are always coming out. And so I'm the same. I'm always learning. I'm always reading new stuff. So if I can just bring it forward a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you get into the sex addiction? That's fairly niche, and in Irish society, conservative society, where we don't talk about sex really, sex addiction, it's fairly niche here. So if you want to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I did a bit of a training on it, a 2-day workshop, and it got my interest. Again, like, I have 2 daughters, and I think at the time, one of them was only kind of just born. I think she was born, but I definitely had 1 daughter anyway. It was around that time. I think I had 2 daughters. They were very, very young. And kind of what I learned in the 2-day training, I was saying, oh shit, we're in trouble. As a nation, we're in trouble because there's nothing here. I remember asking 2 colleagues, where do we send people in Ireland for sex addiction? Kind of going, there's a 5-week program in Dublin, that's about it. And then you come back outside, what? And it was very expensive. I was saying, what about the normal kind of everyday man on the street who can't afford 10, 12, 13 grand to go away for 5 weeks? And they were saying there is nothing, So I did a pilot program with a colleague of mine, and the people who attended the pilot program had been to New York and had been out foreign, had been over to London and been to this place in Dublin, but they all had money. They were all they were able to pay for it. And I was thinking, well, if the wealthy are suffering with a sex addiction, what about the people who aren't so wealthy? So I started up SALT. I started it up, myself and 2 colleagues, and that was around 7 or 8 years ago, I think. And ever since, it's just snowballed.
And did that grow out of people presenting to you with these issues, and you're looking then for help outside of you, and it just wasn't there? So you devised the program yourself?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the program?
So the program, I went over and I trained, like I said, with Paula Hall. did a year's training with Paula Hall and came back, and again the UK is very different to here. You know, there's subtle differences. So again, I wanted a program that everybody could access. Okay, so I did a very low cost, and I did it based on group therapy. Okay, and so the program now, I'm writing up kind of a manual at the moment. So I think this year I joined with the Sexual Health Centre, so they basically took over SALT. So Martin and Catherine in the Sexual Health Centre kind of seen the value of it. So they said, right, we'll come together and we'll do this. And I kind of said, look, this is what I want. I want something that's going to be able to be sent to Limerick, Galway, Dublin, wherever around the country. So we spoke about it. We developed a plan that we would manualize what I'm doing and set up kind of places around the country, because I was getting calls from all over the country. You know, I was getting calls from Waterford, Tipperary, Kerry. You know, do you work with it? And I said, yeah, but this is how I work with it. So you'd have to be traveling every week. So it wasn't viable for people. Now some people people were coming from Waterford, and they were coming from Tipperary, they were coming from Kerry, but long term it wasn't viable for them. So I devised a program that over the years, and kind of all of my learnings, that we have an assessment. So the assessment takes about 4 hours altogether. So you'll have you come in, we meet, we sit down. Are you in the right place? Are you not in the right place? Can we help you? You know, all this kind of thing. So it's just a meet and a sit down and see what is the problem. And after that, then there's a 3-hour assessment. So you're looking at everything. You're looking at sex addiction, porn addiction, alcoholism, drug use. How much are they drinking? Is drink the primary or drugs the primary? Is there something else going on? Is there mental health issues? You look at trauma, their past, their attachment. So the assessment takes about 3 hours, and you have a good sense of the person. Then coming in, you're saying, are they suitable for SALT? If they're suitable for SALT, they do a 10-week psychoeducational program.
They have to be very honest in that assessment.
Kind of what I find is people generally are as honest as they can be.
Because when you're talking about sex, there's a lot of fear that you're not going to be accepted for whatever's going on for you.
Spot on.
You know?
Yeah.
So I can imagine like that assessment, I'm sure now you're trained, they kind of get a little bit of a just about people, even though they're not telling you everything, and you can understand them.
Yeah, you do. I don't think anybody who ever goes in for an assessment is completely honest.
Yeah.
You know, and there's stuff that you're not even aware of.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, but it all comes out eventually. Like, people tell the truth eventually when they realise, I didn't even realise that was a problem. And that's actually a big part of the healing, is people coming up and saying, like, I never even thought of these questions, you know. And then they might come back at the end of it and say, and like some of the questions will be repeated, and they might give a different answer and saying, well, I didn't even think about that, you know. And that's just part of the process, and you take that for.
Can I ask you, because I'm thinking now how the audience is thinking here.
Yeah.
How does sex addiction manifest for different people? Is it like addiction? Is it prostitution? Is it asking your partner for extreme demands?
Keep going. It's all of them. It's there's probably an hour alone in actually explaining how it does manifest. Like, I don't think you can pinpoint exactly. Like, people use sex workers, people use pornography. It's whatever. And I think the reason we kind of stuck with the SALT is it's sex and love therapy. It mightn't exactly define as an addiction. It might be your relationship with sex.
What kind of damage is porn doing to young people? Like, it's so accessible at the moment. Everybody has a phone, and all you have to do is just type in a name or a word on the phone, and it'll come up. And you have kids as young as, I don't know, well, 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever.
The report recently coming out of, I think some paper in the Dáil, I was reading it, was they're saying 8. Okay. That's when they're starting watching it. Now, you think of the damage that does to a child's brain, watching, and what used to be an extreme porn before, or hardcore porn, is now the norm. It's now the norm. So the effect that's had, like, a lot of the people that I'd be working with today would be in our age group.
Yeah.
When back in the day it was a magazine, and the effects it has had on them. But now I'm starting to see more and more younger people, and they had access to internet. No,
because years ago, if somebody in the estate had a video, it might get passed around, or a magazine, you know.
Magazine.
But now if a child has a smartphone with Google on it, they're exposed to it, you know. Unless you've restrictions on the phone, anything. And I've heard anecdotally from a nurse of young adolescent girls coming into the A&E with rectal damage because of anal sex with no lubricant. Because the boys are looking at the porn, they think that this is appropriate behaviour and this is real life and this is what we can do.
There's research done in the States actually to back that up in some of the universities in the States, that's what girls are presenting with. So I think Ireland, and kind of a motivator for me to start SALT was that, and kind of the reason I joined up as well, kind of myself and the Sexual Health Centre joined up, was that we can see what's coming, you know, and I don't want to think that we're going to be 10 years down the road thinking, shit, like we should be doing something about this. You know, I want us to be kind of ready for what is going to be coming, because it's here now. It just hasn't really, like the way I'd look at it is, we had no advertising, not a card, not a flyer. We had nothing. I think only recently the Sexual Health Centre did put out some social media, but at that stage we were almost practically full anyway, and people were still coming, word of mouth. You know, so like it's already there. It's concerning, but I think
where do you see it in 5-10 years time? Can you see this expanding and being brought into other countries? Because
SALT,
because it seems very important.
Could you like go to Dublin or Donegal or wherever and train psychotherapists so they can deliver the program?
That's the plan. That is more or less the plan. That we will be training people in delivering the program. Now it's psychotherapists with a good background of addiction. You really do need a good background in addiction for understanding an addictive process, understanding addiction, you know, in general. Like the way I kind of set this one up is there's almost 4 legs to it. There's the assessment, there is the psychoeducation 10-week program, and then there's a group where basically you're helping somebody develop as themselves, along with undoing the sex addiction or the sexual beliefs or whatever is going on. There's we'll call it problematic use of pornography, whatever is going on, that you have a group for that. And then if you want to go on further, there is another group where it's more of your own personal development, where we kind of say, look, we've kind of pretty much dealt with the sexual side of it, but to keep growing as a person, there's another group. Now at the moment that group is full, because like some of the people who've been coming to the groups have stayed in the groups. I would say they're doing exceptionally well. Some of them were there 3 or 4 years and they just enjoy the group therapy. You know, it's not like the sex part has gone out of it. They understand the sex part of it, the addictive part of it. They've dealt with it. It's more their own development now is what they're looking for. And
the group, as it sounds to me, being in a group like that and talking about whatever's going on for you, you know, it helps the people in the group to feel like they have a relation, you know, they're not their own. You know, it sounds fantastic. It's like an AA group you walk into, but AA is AA, but as James said earlier, sex in this country, it's like you don't talk about it.
No.
You know, there's a lot of shame surrounds it. You know,
I think that may as well explain why the people in your group tend to be in their 30s and 40s, because you have to have a certain level of maturity to address it, and we might find it hard to get the most at-risk people, which would be the younger people, to come in, because it's such a hard thing to talk about from.
I have come across a few and they've been very open, but only because to the point of where their minds have gone. Because they're kind of at that, when we used to talk about rock bottom, John, we used to hit our rock bottom, you say a person doesn't have to be at rock bottom, but it's when people have gone to that place where I just can't take it anymore, and they can see the damage it's doing. So people are coming younger,
Can I bring up a couple of taboos?
Do.
Paedophilia, rape,
Yeah.
these type of things. Do people present to them with you?
No. Salt is very different, okay?
Yeah.
So, like, Patrick Hearns had 3 levels, okay? The 2 you've described there would be in level 3. We don't work with level 3.
Yeah.
That's beyond our
It's
realm.
very specialist, like.
It's very specialist. We'd work on people with what we say level 1, you know, or maybe some degree of level 2 where it's kind of exhibitionism, that kind of stuff, where people are just doing things that kind of impulsively or kind of just, you know,
Risky behaviours.
risky behaviours.
Yeah.
That might be frowned upon, and that might be, some of them might be borderline kind of criminality,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally it's level 1. So it's pornography, visiting sex workers. It's kind of, even though that's not criminalised.
A lot of the stuff in level 2 and 3 anyway, that'd be probably in prisons. People would be working on that.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, and a lot of sex offenders, when they come out, they do probation service, and a lot of it is addressing what you do maybe in them, within the confines of the sentence. One thing I wanted to ask you there as well was, you know, for people with addiction, severely traumatized people coming from child abuse, and is it the same with the sex? Are people coming there, have they
spot on?
It's the same.
It's the same thing.
It's just a manifestation.
It's
a
just
different manifestation,
different.
obviously.
It's just different.
Another symptom.
That's exactly it. Like, if you look at an addiction tree, you know, there's gambling on it, there's food on it, there's nicotine, there is drink, there's alcohol, there is drugs, there's sex, there's codependency. To me, it's just another form of, like, an addictive, a way to escape. It's an escapism. There's a slight difference with sex and love, and I'm going to put love in there as well, is that people crave love. So underlying, a part of the assessment is, and it has come up with everyone I've assessed, underlying their craving for sex or sexual acting out or even sexual avoidance or sexual binge purge, there is this longing in each one of them for love, to feel loved. That's really what it comes down to. They want to feel connected. That's why I think the majority will come, people who come and stay in the groups, it's they feel connected in the group. You know, they feel connected to their facilitator or to their peers. You know, they feel like these people actually care about me. They'll all have ACEs. You know, everyone presents with ACEs.
ACEs, adverse childhood
experiences. Yeah.
We spoke about that before on the podcast with Sharon Lambert.
With Sharon, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That you could do another podcast on that. It's such a broad topic.
And if you want to just refresh people that's watching, explain ACEs.
ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, which are, I suppose, people who, like ourselves, who would say we grew up, it was our norm.
The more you've experienced, it could be an alcoholic parent, it could be poverty, it could be violence in the home, be violence against you, sexual abuse, neglect. The more, and there's 10. The more you have, research shows that if you have four
or more,
way more likely to end up in addiction and mental health. If you have 5, 6, it multiplies. So the more you have, the more likely you are to
chronic illnesses, all that sort of
so the people that are presenting to you would mark high on the ACE scores.
Yeah, they'd all have ACEs. And like Paula Hall has a lovely model, and I'd use it now for all addictions, the OAT model, where there's opportunity, attachment and trauma. And like, you have to have opportunity. So you think in Ireland, if there was no pubs, there was no off licence, there was no drink for sale, you wouldn't have any alcoholics. You know? No. So there has to be opportunity. But now, since everybody's walking around with mobile phones, there is more opportunity to access pornography. So you're going to have more people addicted to pornography. They'll use it. They'll continuously use it because it's in their pocket 24/7. It's there all the time. Now, there is no morals here around us kind of judging people who use pornography. It's used. It's part of society, the same as the internet is. Yeah. But for some people, it's like alcohol. Some people have no problem with alcohol. Other people do. You know? So the opportunity is there. Attachment then. how you attach or didn't attach to your parents or parental figure, that would be there. So they'd have attachment, what we call attachment deficits, and then trauma. But trauma is huge in all the people I meet, and like I would do an ACEs with everyone, and everyone shows up with ACEs. You know,
I remember doing it with Jay years ago when I would have worked with Donal as well years ago.
Yeah.
He would have worked as my psychotherapist for a bit, and we done the ACEs as well. And for me, it was something new, and but it also helped me to understand a little bit about myself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
It helped me understand why I felt and was the way I was. You know, and I done some research on it as well, and it just gave me a broader understanding of my own stuff. You know, in terms of, do you know what? I'm not a bad person. Stuff happened. I feel like this. You know, and what do we do now to make it better? You know, and it was just therapy. And for me, I always said meditation was massively beneficial for me because it just always brought me back. You know, it always brought me into the moment, and I was able to feel whatever trapped energies were within my body from any experiences I would have had as a child or in addiction or whatever. And it definitely helped me, you know. Before we do finish up, I just want to say something. Like, I always talk about one person, like, that
one good adult. Yeah.
Like, when I went into treatment, it's 9 years now. This December I'll be 9 years away from a drinking and drug, and a gamble and everything, a crime and all that mad shit. But I met Donal in Table Lodge 9 years ago, and I seen this fucker, and excuse me language. No, he had a load of tattoos as well, like, and he's a strong bit of a fella, like that. And I got chatting to him anyway, and we were chatting away, and actually it was my counsellor down there. She said to me, she says, there's a fella here, he works here, he'd be good for you to have a talk with. And I says, grand. So I said, fuck, I couldn't wait for this fella to come now, you know. I thought he was going to touch me in the top of the head and say, you're cured, you're grand. But anyway, he came anyway, and we had a good chat, and he was telling me about his own experience. And you know what? It was that night where I just said to myself, you know what? I want a bit of that. I wanted something like that. And I got out of prison 3 years later, and I phoned him, and I asked him to be my sponsor. And he became my sponsor for a few years, and then we stopped for a few years, and then I connected with you with the psychotherapy because I knew what I was going to get, you know. And everything he did, you know, you need that person in recovery because you're not well. Let's be honest. When you're early recovery, your head is not well. Like,
no.
You need that one person that you can look up to and listen to. And if he told me to cross the road and jump in front of a car, like, if I thought it would help me on my road to recovery, I would have done it. Like, I would have done it, and you know, I'll forever be grateful for that. You know, for you helping me, and still, you know, listen, we're good friends now again, and you know, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that you're after helping like that. You know, and I the reason I'm after saying this now is because I just want to tell people, like, as many times I do say it, like, I have that one person, or there's always that, or if I say it in a meeting or whatever, I just want to clarify it, Donal. Good man.
Good man. He's the man. And just before we finish up as well, and just for people that are watching and listening, if there's a young person in the family, or I don't know, young people, I know there's a collaboration between the Cork ETB and the Sexual Health Centre at the moment, the Sexual Hub, where youth workers can access services of the Sexual Health Centre if they have concerns for a young person, and for adults, if they have concerns about themselves, friends or family, they can contact the Sexual Health Centre in Cork. We link their website in the description, and we hope people enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, lads. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Man.